Hello everyone, welcome to my channel SW Metro official channel.
Janelle's cold, calculated lawsuit against Kody and the stunning, almost poetic departure of Robyn, the very architect of the monogamous monarchy within the polygamous kingdom, was not a sudden collapse but the final, inevitable result of a foundation built on the quicksand of one wife's manipulation and one husband's spiraling narcissism. For years, the narrative had been carefully controlled, a performance of unity staged for the cameras and, perhaps more importantly, for the other wives, with Robyn playing the tearful, misunderstood peacemaker and Kody the beleaguered patriarch trying to hold his fracturing world together. But the truth, like a stubborn weed, finally broke through the concrete, revealing a landscape where financial betrayal was the currency of control and emotional abuse was disguised as spiritual leadership, culminating in a legal and personal reckoning that saw the manipulator lose her grip and the exploited finally seize their power. The genius of Robyn's manipulation lay not in its complexity, but in its insidious, patient application, a slow drip of poison into the family's well. From the very beginning, her role was distinct. She was not another sister wife but a replacement for the entire concept. She entered the family not as a partner in the existing structure but as its future architect, and her first masterstroke was the systematic dismantling of Kody's existing relationships by becoming his sole emotional confidant. She weaponized vulnerability, presenting herself as the one who truly understood him, who validated his grievances against the difficult and disrespectful other wives who dared to expect time, resources, and fidelity to the original family unit. Every whispered conversation, every private moment captured on camera where she soothed his ego, was a brick laid in the wall separating Kody from Mary, Janelle, and Christine. She reframed their reasonable requests for equity as attacks on his authority and her own position as the only safe harbor in the storm she was helping to create. The infamous COVID-19 protocols were not merely about health, they were the ultimate manifestation of this control, a set of rules drafted by Robyn and enforced by Kody that legally and emotionally sanctified his isolation with her and her children, rendering the other families literal outsiders. She didn't need to loudly demand his time, she quietly engineered a reality where he had no other choice but to give it to her, all while maintaining the performative anguish of a woman who just wanted her sister wives to follow the rules so they could all be together. This emotional coup was powerfully complemented by a calculated financial strategy that cemented her position as the primary wife in all but name. The entire debacle of the Flagstaff move and the protracted, financially draining purchase of the McMansion on the hill, known as the Chiare Chateau, was a case study in economic coercion. While Janelle and Christine were pressured to liquidate their Las Vegas homes, assets in their own names, to pour funds into the family pot for the move, Robyn secured a lavish rental and then a permanent, debt-laden estate that stood in stark contrast to Janelle's RV or Christine's modest home. The crown jewel of this financial empire, however, was the barren, unimproved land of Coyote Pass. Here, Robyn's manipulation reached its zenith. She and Kody consistently blocked the other wives from building, using every excuse from financial constraints to nebulous pond permits, all while ensuring their own financial interests were protected. The property was strategically divided, with the plots with the most valuable assets, the purported pond, deeded to Robyn and Kody. This ensured that even as the family dream died, their personal equity was safeguarded. Janelle, the family's longtime budget keeper and financial pragmatist, watched in horror as her financial contributions and future security were held hostage to Robyn's ever-shifting whims and Kody's blatant favoritism. The family pot, once a symbol of shared sacrifice, was revealed to be a one-way funnel into Robyn's household, funding nannies, expensive jewelry, and a lifestyle the other wives could only observe from a distance. For Janelle, the realization was not a sudden explosion but a cold, dawning clarity. The woman who had always been the family's rational anchor, who valued logic over drama and financial stability over romantic gestures, finally reached her limit not with a scream, but with a spreadsheet. Her lawsuit against Kody was the ultimate act of defiance from the wife he had always taken for granted as the unemotional, compliant workhorse. It was not an act of petty revenge but a necessary, legal severance of the toxic financial enmeshment that had trapped her. By suing him, likely over the tangled assets of Coyote Pass or other joint financial ventures, she was doing what she had always done, practically and decisively protecting her own interests. But this time it was for herself, not for the family. This legal action was the final, irrevocable statement that she no longer saw him as a husband or a head of household, but as an untrustworthy business partner who had breached their contract. It was the moment the unflappable strategist turned her analytical mind to her own liberation, using the law to carve her freedom out of the financial ruin he and Robyn had created. Her departure was the quietest but perhaps the most devastating to Kody's ego, because it was utterly devoid of the emotional anguish he thrived on. It was a simple, professional dissolution, a declaration that he held no more power over her life, her heart, or her bank account. And then, in the ultimate irony, the very foundation of the new monogamous monarchy crumbled. Robyn's entire power was predicated on being the chosen one, the last wife standing, the sole beneficiary of Kody's time, affection, and resources. But what she failed to anticipate was the nature of the man she had championed. Kody Brown, stripped of his sprawling family, his identity as a patriarch, and his external adversaries, was left with nothing but his own raging narcissism and the woman he had burned his world down for. The dynamic that had once been a thrilling secret alliance against a common enemy quickly curdled in the isolation. Without other wives to blame, to manipulate him against, and to serve as a distraction, Kody's fury had nowhere to go but toward Robyn. The man who was never happy, who thrived on chaos and conflict, now had only one target. The gilded cage she had built became her prison. The tears she had once used as a weapon now became a constant reality as she faced the unenviable task of living full-time with a man consumed by bitterness, regret, and rage. The dream of being the sole queen of a ruined castle lost its allure. Her departure, therefore, was not one of righteous empowerment like Christine's, or pragmatic severance like Janelle's, but one of abject failure. She had won the prize, only to discover it was worthless. In leaving, she was not escaping patriarchy or seeking independence, she was simply admitting that her grand manipulation had yielded a hollow victory, a life with a broken man and the wreckage of the family she systematically dismantled. She didn't lose the game, she won it, and in winning, discovered there was no prize, only the ashes of the very kingdom she had sought to rule. Kody, and the ultimate, ironic departure of Robyn, the purported obedient wife, were not isolated incidents but the direct and inevitable consequences of a systemic con orchestrated by Kody and Robyn against the other three wives. This was not a mere breakdown of a plural marriage, it was a calculated demolition where Robyn, presented as the prize, was in fact the primary architect of a long con, leveraging Kody's narcissism and favoritism to systematically alienate him from his other families, consolidate power, and secure all resources for herself and her children, a scheme so successful that it ultimately consumed its own architect when Kody, stripped of his other sources of supply and wealth, became a burden even she could not bear. From the moment Robyn entered the family, she introduced a virus of discord camouflaged as sweetness and victimhood. Her mastery was not in overt demands but in subtle, psychological manipulation that perfectly complemented Kody's craving for admiration and control. She weaponized her status as the new, younger wife, not through confrontation, but through a curated performance of submission that made her the easy, drama-free alternative to the established wives who had real, decades-long grievances and needs. While Mary, Christine, and Janelle were navigating the complex realities of raising 13 children and managing fractured time and resources, Robyn offered Kody a fantasy, a separate, pristine home where he was not a harried patriarch but a revered king, where the tender-aged children always needed him more, and where his authority was never questioned, only flattered. This created a feedback loop of favoritism. The more Kody preferred Robyn's company, the more resentful and difficult the other wives became, which in turn justified his spending even more time with Robyn. She didn't need to steal Kody, she simply created an environment where he would willingly flee, and she positioned herself as the sole comforting refuge from the chaos his own neglect had created. The financial